we are sponsoring a race car.
What is wrong with us? We know
Let's
this
talk
is
about
a
it.
terrible decision.
What is wrong with
Not
us?
kidding. All right, hello, welcome to Money Lap. I'm Parker Kligerman, joined as always by Landon Cassill. This is our podcast about all things motorsports, and as always, go check out moneylap.com for the newsletter that we put out 3 times a week, including the highlights, which we'll get into a little bit later. But Landon, as always, we start with the PR lap, which is where we get to talk about ourselves, our podcast, and our newsletter, which are crushing it.
Absolutely. Who are we hearing from today? Did we get any more reviews?
We have. So we're on a march to 100, and right now we're, I think, 75. So we're getting there. We're only 25 away, which is pretty impressive. On Spotify, we had Potatoes giving us another shout-out. Another great episode, wonderful variety of topics, looking out for the IndyCar race, and the next episode, if an F1 arcade comes around, see if they have potatoes and rate them for me. Thanks, guys. We'll get that, sure.
What kind
Apple,
of potatoes do you think they have at the F1 arcade?
I'm going to say
do you think
fries.
the F1 arcade is like a tater tots type of place, or
No. It's gonna be fries with the herbs on it, and occasionally you get the cheese on there as well. You know what I'm talking
like
about?
a truffle.
It's
Like
gonna be
a
truffle
truffle. You think they're like a truffle fry type place?
100%
Okay.
truffle fry type place. Yeah, we actually have
You
some
think
insight in
the
the F1
NASCAR
arcade.
cafe is more of a tater tot venue?
The NASCAR cafe was definitely more tater tot. We'll get into that. We actually have a review from an F1 arcade, which we'll shout out in a minute. But before we go into that, we need to shout out some of the 5-star reviews on Apple, because that's where we're trying to get to 100. Dean Adder said the best true look into all motorsports. He then says basically he's been catching up and he enjoys it and it's funny. Thanks, buddy. He loves our reads. KPSPKP, that's a really hard name. Great show, insightful, insider's information, and quite entertaining. Chris Perry, great podcast for 2 guys who have struggled through their NASCAR careers. Ouch. Although Parker has a couple of trick wins, and then he really just says what have we done. Very good information about all forms of racing, including F1. We got Brandy Patenjo out there, entertaining, insightful, and surreal folk blues. No parking pass required. A podcast that leaves no stripe and makes you feel like #got that upgrade for tuning in. That's the winner right there. Combining all of our social media topics into one single review.
That's a great one. You did lose your parking, but did you recover your parking pass after losing it?
So this is sore subject. No, I have not, because they will not make another one. It's apparently been I've been informed. So once you lose this plastic parking pass that has the number of your car on it in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, you will not get another one. I think I'm no rocket scientist, and I am obviously at fault for losing it, but I surely believe there's a better system than this, where I have now been put into parking pass purgatory via the one single time I forget it after, not being so, just in a frustrated frame of mind after just missing out on winning a race. And now I'm never gonna have a parking pass again.
You made it to June. That's not bad. I mean, I went years and
halfway.
never made it past Vegas in March.
Well,
So
you did say May is bloody, and it was also bloody for my podcast, my
it's
parking
bloody,
pass.
and that includes crew chiefs, drivers, and parking passes. Have a hard time making it past May.
Poor parking pass. We'll see if I can acquire something else out there to help me get into the racetracks, but this will be a running theme. I mean, maybe you just have to win a championship or something, and they'll allow you a second parking pass in the future. But we'll keep working at it.
I bet they would give Jimmy Johnson another parking pass.
Except for when he showed. You remember when he showed up with just like a VIP pass and no credential before he bought back in? When he was announcing that he was buying into Legacy Motor Club?
Oh, he didn't even have a hard card?
Didn't have a hard card. Had to go to sign in at the trailer. Yeah. I'm sure he would now have one going forward.
God.
Hey, you know what? If we were at going to Watkins Glen this weekend, which we won't be because I'll be racing in Nashville, but if we were, it sounds like we would have an easy time possibly getting into the MX-5 Cup Garage, by the way.
That's right. We are sponsoring a race car.
What is wrong with us? We know
Let's
this
talk
is
about
a
it.
terrible decision.
What is wrong with us? We're stuck right in. It's so unavoidable. You will see the money lap on Sam Paley's MX-5 Cup car this weekend. It's having a solid year. Former NASCAR driver Chad McCumbie's team. That's pretty cool. We're really excited to partner with them and support the series, support the team, support the driver, and hopefully in return, some people might support the money lap.
Yeah, they can sign up to our email list or just listen to this podcast. Would be awesome. So good luck to Sam Paley. I've raced in that series. It was absolutely a blast last year at Road America. Had so much fun, and I know James Hinchcliffe is actually racing. So fellow broadcaster, podcaster, and race car driver out there who will also be doing his first MX-5 Cup race. So that'll be cool to watch. I'll be checking in when I can, but as I mentioned, Nashville this weekend, it's going to be really busy. I also have TV. More about us, by the way. You made it pretty well known that we're big fans of low downforce, so much so that we reduced the downforce on the Monday highlights money lap email.
We removed spoilers per request. You know, it's just fans. They're in line with drivers. They don't want spoilers. They don't want downforce. So we took the spoilers out of our Monday newsletter, meaning our newsletter descriptions and titles don't say anything about what happened in the race specifically in terms of results if you didn't watch it. So you can receive those emails and you can open them and you can watch those highlights and you're not gonna get any spoilers there. Or you can get the email and kind of embargo it and go watch your replay of the race if you saved the race somewhere or want to watch a replay of it. If you didn't catch the races over the weekend. So yes, we reduced some downforce. We removed the spoilers from the Money Lap Monday newsletter. What do we call that newsletter? The Monday newsletter, the highlight video.
It's a highlight.
Reel?
Yeah, it's just the highlights. So basically, it's all the video highlights out there from all the major racing series that raced over the weekend. Just basically providing you the link so you don't have to go searching around. And it's basically what we've termed is the Monday highlights with zero effort on your part. So it's just all right there for you to click and watch. And I've used it multiple times. It's actually very helpful. So I love it.
Yeah. So it's the moneylap.com. You can subscribe now, and yeah, you can get your Monday highlights now with no spoilers. But speaking of spoilers, spoilerdiecast.com. If you're a racing fan, you're going to want to check out their offerings. Not only do they have one of the largest inventories of in-stock diecast productions in the industry, they also offer free shipping on orders over $20 and a pre-order system for diecast with a zero down option. And if you use the promo code MONEYLAP at checkout, you'll receive free shipping and 5% off all orders. It's the most aggressive offer in their space, so don't miss out. Head to spoilerdiecast.com today and start adding to your diecast collection. They've got F1, NASCAR, IndyCar, all the cars. What do you think there, Parker?
Got me again. No spoilers unless it's Spoiler Diecast. Check out spoilerdiecast.com. We love them. Thank you for supporting the pod. Please go check out all their inventory. We've been checking out. I actually was almost I've been close to putting in some. I want some new diecast down here for my place in Charlotte. So I will be getting those at Spoiler Diecast. You better believe it. You know what they don't have though, diecast wise, because it was one handmade, I believe, out there. I have it at my place in Connecticut, but there was someone out there who brought up, because of the Garage 56 deal at Le Mans, the time that we were the NASBOIS and raced in the 24 hours of Nürburgring. And our AMG Mercedes that was covered in NASCAR logos all over it. So Noah Larson, who put this out there, said, "The NASBOIS Walked so Garage 56 could run. We basically blazed the path for them. That's what you're saying. Love that.
We did, yeah. And I told my story on Twitter about how I was, I suppose, the original simulator test driver for Garage 56 when I tested the next gen at Le Mans in the sim for NASCAR. Unbeknownst to me that car would ultimately be raced at Le Mans. And then later that year, we formed the NASBOIS. We ran the Nürburgring 24 on iRacing. We ran the Daytona 24. We had some good races with the NASBOIS. We need to bring it back.
I know. One of these days. We just need a little bit more time. So I look forward to it. But we blazed the path. And, the first through the, doesn't always get all the rewards and the accolades, but we just keep going, and maybe there'll be some on the other side, So,
Also, Parker, because I told you I was going to do this, we had some follow-up from our conversations last week. So David, the Fan Institute on Twitter, actually attended an F1 arcade, and he gave us a full-on review with photos. I guess we can. Does he talk about potatoes? I don't think he talks about potatoes. So we still don't know what kind of potatoes are at F1 arcade. But David at Fan Institute tweeted, "Hey, Moneylap crew, we made it to the F1 arcade today in London. Overall impressive, 60 full motion rigs, multiple small group areas to compete head-to-head, private briefing room with gold rigs." I don't know what that means. That's interesting. DJ setting the nightclub vibe for a Friday evening. 4.5 out of 5 stars. There's a few pictures here in video. The pepperoni flatbread doesn't look great, though.
So shout out to David, friend of the pod, who went out and got all this information, and really, went above and beyond with this review. So if you've been curious about the F1 arcade, go check it out. We were curious about it. So it does seem to be very sim racing based, which obviously arcade, sim racing, video game. And I think that's, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I don't want to put everyone to sleep. But I think, and you and I have had more discussions on this since, and I think we'll continue to discuss this because it's an interesting thought process with racing, which is truly trying to make what quote-unquote top golf of motorsports should potentially involve some form of physical car, right? But we've talked about the pitfalls of that. One, there's drinking and driving sort of things. There's the space required for that. Go-kart facilities, have probably entirely different insurance program than the F1 arcade needs, so on and so forth. And obviously professional racetracks need a different insurance. So there's a lot of barriers, and it will be interesting to see is if this, using the name, one, having F1 in the name can, garner that support to be kind of the motorsports spot that you go hang out. But two, how to mix in physical cars, right? Something like that, potentially, because that's sort of, I think, the gap for me at times with this idea. This to me is more of a sim racing place, right? Even if the rigs have some motion or that sort of thing, it's still not the same. It's not even close. So I don't know. It's a thought. It's an interesting discussion, and I think we're going to continue to flesh this out because to me, no one has really solved the Top Golf and Motorsports idea.
Real cars are tough though because people don't want to get all dressed up to go out and then get dirty because they're driving a car and there's rubber dust and dirt and grime, or they don't want to do their hair and then put on a helmet. It's still, don't get me wrong, going to the go-kart track for an evening is a fun thing to do, but if you're trying to capture that New York nightlife type scene, young people that are bar hopping going between a Top Golf type destination or a nightclub, or go there and then a nightclub later on, I don't think they want to get all messied up by racing go-karts.
It is a good point. That is the problem. And you also can't be hammered and go-kart racing. There'd be issues there.
That's right. Yeah, the drinking and driving is the one that I struggle with. So it's like, how do we promote? Not to say, I'm not trying to say that like you can drinking and golfing. I don't know. It just doesn't. It just is a different. It's a different vibe.
You mean highly encouraged?
you can.
Highly encouraged to drink and golf.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, having a couple drinks and golfing there's nothing wrong with that, right? Or bowling or something like that. But the idea of serving someone drinks while they're also driving, even if it's a virtual car, to me is there's a hurdle that you have to get over.
Yes, I don't fully. I know last week I kind of agreed with you, but then I thought about it more, and I thought about video games and arcades and the idea that, like, that's, to me, that doesn't, the gap there.
You're like, hell with it.
Yeah, well, not even just that. I'm just like, I don't see it. I think it's virtual, so I'm like, this is fake. Who cares? Right? I think if it was physical, if there was a physical object there, obviously, if you were in a go-kart, that's a no. If you were driving something that's maybe a little bit more physical, I don't know, but has more is more real. Say RC cars, whatever. Maybe that's a little different, right? But when it's in the virtual world, I don't know. I personally didn't think of that right away. But then I was having a discussion with a friend this past weekend, and the immediate first thought was, what about drinking and driving? So you're not alone. Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll keep you posted on F1 Arcade. I think that's still the Money Lap still needs to do its own review of the F1 Arcade. So I think a trip to London is in the near future.
Basically, we're sponsoring race cars. Next thing we know, we're taking international trips, most likely, and after that, world domination. Yeah.
My wife just turned and looked at me like real funny.
Before we
I don't
go
know
there,
if you just heard that she's in. She said she's in. She wants to go to London.
Love it. Perfect. This is great. Hi, if you're an advertiser out there and would like to support the Money Lap's trip to London, please write to us at
to review the F1 Arcade.
Contact at themoneylap.com. Yeah. That works great. We would love this to be paid for, or for someone to pay. If F1 Arcade wants to pay for us to go there, we'll come there. We'll do a live show, and we will.
Oh, there we go. And we will write
a
stellar review. We will be big fans, guaranteed support.
Well,
it'll be totally professional
and unbiased. There will be absolutely no bias if you pay for us to come out there and have a great time in London. Oh, well,
just for total transparency, in this review of F1 Arcade, they gave me 50 beers.
They paid for us to come here first class. We've been here for a week. That's awesome. I mean, that would be cool if it happened. We'll see. Speaking of, we got to move on. Some news. There was actual race cars on the racetracks in the wide world of motorsports this past weekend. One of the biggest, Formula One, was in Montreal in Canada. Had a rain-affected qualifying, which was interesting. And then in the race, something new and different. Nah, I'm just kidding. Max Verstappen won. Red Bull's 100th win. I thought the podium was interesting in that it was Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, which the three of them, Max Verstappen, Lewis, and Fernando Alonso, all are in the top 10 in on the ranking of wins in Formula One, which I thought was really cool. So cool to see those guys who have had a lot of success be at the front. Although the funny part to me that stuck out with that is the guy who won is vastly younger than the other two. So he could be on his way to, breaking a lot of records. I believe he tied Senna's wins this week, which is a pretty, for any Formula One driver, is a pretty big moment. But also I saw Lewis Hamilton comment on this, just doing it at his age, how young he is. If he wants, although he's made it very clear, winning isn't the only thing that will keep him driving for a long time. If he wants, he could shatter all sorts of records.
Yeah, that was that was wild. The pole run in the rain was maybe one of the most interesting parts of the weekend, I suppose. Did you watch much? Did you watch any of it?
I didn't get to see qualifying. I didn't really get to see qualifying. I got to watch the race.
It was interesting. I really just watched his pole lap, and it's cool to see him, have to control. You get to see a little bit more in detail the drivers having to control the throttle, and to even see a pole run where he's playing with the gas out of the corners, out of the hairpin, being off, the strategy offline and just a little bit, not entirely offline, which that always surprises me with those F1 cars, where, in NASCAR, when we race in the rain, it seems like you have to be completely offline in every single corner, where those guys are not entirely offline all the time, or maybe it's just by a matter of feet that they're offline and not entire car widths like we are. Do you know why that is, or do they just have more capability? I mean, is there so much downforce in those cars that even in the rain they can still run a lot of the racing line?
Yes, it's 100% it. So unlike us who rely entirely on mechanical grip when you enter the rain scenario, right, with a big heavy car with skinny tires, for them, they're still producing an immense amount of downforce. So you can right. counteract the lack of mechanical grip with staying on the line. Now, there is slight corners and places, I believe, that you'll see them sort of do that. I think of Spa. I'm trying to think of that exact corner complex, but it's on the back side. It's a long left-hander, double apex. Occasionally, you can run a little bit offline there. There's grip for them. Occasionally, if you get off in the paint a little bit with your right sides before the rumble strips. But primarily, yeah, you're right, is that for them, it really just adjusts how hard they can brake and the amount of throttle. But in terms of line, you're still aiming to do the same line because the downforce negates the lack of mechanical grip.
Interesting. So that was pretty interesting. And then in the race, he just pretty much killed him. So
he had a bird.
I mentioned
that
this
went in his
previous.
Car.
Yeah, I got stuck in their brakes, I guess, and after the race that they had said they found a bird in his brake caliper or brake cooling. I don't know.
The duct. Yeah.
I've mentioned this in previous shows, and I don't know if it's just my algorithm on Twitter or what echo chamber I'm in terms of F1 Twitter, but I keep seeing these tweets and these headlines from engineering F1 Twitter talking about everybody's upgrades they're making, and they're like, every team keeps saying we have an upgrade this week and that week, and it's another 0.3 and it's another 0.3, and then I see the fans replying underneath it, and they're all excited or they get their hopes up, and I'm like, that's just not how it works. Like, Red Bull's getting faster too.
Yes,
they're not. You don't see Red Bull necessarily talking about their upgrades, or maybe you do. I don't notice it, but I noticed the Mercedes and the Astons talking about their upgrades and how they're rolling them out, and I'm like, good for you guys, but
good luck with
that more
one.
Talking about it.
Yeah, I see it too, and
because it just seems funny. Like after all these upgrades, I mean, yeah, I think Mercedes has moved their way up the grid from where they were 4 or 5 weeks ago, but nobody's any closer to the Red Bull. I mean, they're still the pace is still 3 to 5 tenths.
Yep, and this isn't for newer fans out there. It might seem a little bit odd that they talk about these upgrades, but this has gone on for a long time. In Formula One, and it's always just it's the race within the race, or the macro race, which is trying to create a faster car. But the upgrades only happen so fast; they can only build stuff so quickly. Crashing doesn't help often, even without the budget cap. In that era, you still could only produce parts so fast, right? And so, especially when they're just bespoke carbon fiber made parts that take time and take time to make. So it's always been a part of the discussion. I think for sure you have an element, and you mentioned like the echo chamber, which I'm sure our Twitter algorithm is pumping every F1 motorsports thing our way. But you do get the sense of like there is more chatter about these alternate teams that are going to catch or make up this ground and that sort of thing. And it's just like, no, it's not going to happen. Like it's not there. Like there's it's going to have to take something large for them to lose their advantage that they inherently have. And I don't foresee, and I've not seen anyone tell me, and I've seen a lot of comments from drivers and team principals, and not a single one of them has been able to pinpoint to me like, well, if they lost this or if this happened, they would slow down. It's like, nope, no one even knows. They're just like, nope, we would just need something to happen. Okay, what is that thing? No one knows.
In your experience in motorsports, because in NASCAR we've seen teams go on a tear, and NASCAR is an incredibly competitive series, probably more so than F1, right? Because there's just a deeper field and more winners, historically speaking. But we still see people go on a tear, right?
Yep.
Kyle Larson won 10 races a couple years ago. Kevin Harvick's, had his years where there's always been these times where somebody just goes on a tear. In your experience, Parker, what is a typical catalyst for change that brings those advantages back in?
Without regulation change by the series, so natural catalyst?
I don't know, anything.
Well, I would always lean on a rule change, right? Which I think we see a lot more often in NASCAR, right? Because the rule book is, as they like to say, written in pencil, and they have full autonomy to do whatever they want. In Formula One, you can't just make massive rule changes without the entirety of the sport agreeing and the council and sort of the regulations they commit to for periods of time. So you can't just suddenly be like, well, we're just going to change the rear wing on all the cars. Like, no, it doesn't happen that way. Like, there's small things, and they can do things within the safety elements, and they can do small up changes with everyone's approval, but it's a very hard process for them to make the changes we do. So I find for Formula One, normally it's regulation change. That's, the sporting regs changing as they do every 5 or 6 years, right? And having a major shift or someone gaining a major advantage. Potentially at times, I think engines have always been an area where people can make massive gains within a regulatory situation that's static.
It is motorsports.
But other than that, what?
It is called motorsports.
Yeah, it's true. It's not chassis sports. It's not driver sports.
Not aero sports. Not driver sports.
What is it, Landon?
Yeah, I was gonna say rules and regulations in NASCAR. In our experience, I feel like that's usually a catalyst. Like a team will get an advantage, but NASCAR changes the rules so often on their cars, and especially in the Cup Series, I feel like there hasn't been a consistent. I don't want to say there hasn't been, but there's just always something that's getting changed. Up to this point where we're at with the next gen car, with the Gen 6, there was always something getting changed that an advantage could only last 6 to 12 months at most, really, until there was another major rule change that kind of leveled the playing field again.
Yeah, it's.
But on the flip side, I will say that I feel like the constant changing of rules and regulations is maybe in the short term a balancer in terms of competition, but over the course of a long term, a racing series that changes their rules a lot, in my opinion, drives up the cost and really ultimately only benefits. It falls to the benefit of the teams with the most resources. On the
100%.
In the short term,
100%.
It's a balancer.
No, you're 100% right, and I think there's
but if the
a lot
game,
of. Go ahead.
If the game becomes a constant redesign of the race car and a constant need to adapt your R&D and your manufacturing to that redesign, then the biggest manufacturers, the teams with the biggest manufacturing plants will just win over the long term. That's what I mean by short term versus long term. On short term, though, when they change a rule, sometimes that those first race or two, those first few weeks off of a rule change, it looks really exciting. The best example of that, would you remember, Parker, when they first tried the 550 package at the All-Star race back in 2018? 19?
Yeah,
maybe?
I think it was 18. 19.
Do you remember that?
19. It would have been 2019.
And I think it was Ricky Stenhouse driving the 47 car, famously was like top of 3 wide, or it could have been AJ Allmendinger even driving that car. I can't remember who was, but I remember it was like the JTG car, top of 3 wide, driving through the field. People were like, "Oh my gosh, single car team running really good." But that was, people thought, "Oh my gosh, we just found the great equalizer."
Yep.
And ultimately what it was just a short-term change where not any team had found an adaptation to this new package yet. But it didn't take long until the teams with the most resources found their adaptations, built their cars, iterated on them, and got the latest, iterations into production quicker on the racetrack. And right back to what you were used to seeing.
To your point, just to give some facts to that era, so I was driving for Gaunt Brothers that year in 2019. So we go to or maybe 2018 was the first year they did it, the All-Star race, and then they moved to that package in 2019 full-time. So basically we went to...
In 2019, yep, that's what it was.
Yeah, we went to Atlanta. And the year at the November Texas race, that was 1.5 miles, in 2018, we were like, I can't remember, like 1.6 seconds off the lead car, right? When you and I were in those cars when it was basically Formula 1 and NASCAR, the discrepancy between the equipment was massive. And then we went to Atlanta in March that next year in 2019 when they did the 550 package, and we were 0.5 off the leader in qualifying. We had condensed the gap massively, right? And I think we were in a pretty similar position, like 32nd. Well, by the end of that year at Kansas, we went out and qualified, or I can't remember if it was qualifying or we ran just looked at the speeds, but we were like back to 1.4 seconds off the leaders. And it was like,
right.
All right. And we had improved engines. We'd gone to TRD Motors. We'd done a lot of stuff, and you couldn't, the gap just started to inflate massively again. So I agree. Short-term fixes.
Let me give you...
Well, hold on. One more thing on that. Long-term, it's pretty amazing to see what happens when you don't touch it for a while. And I think that's where trucks is, where the rules have not changed for over a decade. So you got a lot of teams that can run really well. And then I think at the top end, Formula One, that last generation car that culminated in that amazing championship battle between Red Bull and Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, was because Red Bull had time to catch up, right? They had time to work within the regulations and get there for regulations that had not changed massively in a long time. And so I think that helped that situation, to your point.
Yeah, that was the next point I was going to make. Is the flip side is when you don't change the rules for a long time, the rate of development on these cars eventually just has to level out. And the amount of money you would have to spend to get that next 100 pounds of downforce is just not justified, right? So that's why I think that's a huge reason why the Xfinity series and the Truck series have such good racing, because their rules packages in those series. The Xfinity series has changed more so than the Truck series, but it's still been a very consistent platform over the last decade. Where the Truck series has really been a consistent platform. So, those series I think have really good racing, and small teams also can compete in those series. Still, they still struggle, and they're still not gonna, get out and win a bunch of races. But there's, your group over there at Henderson. I mean, you guys are a contender almost every time you hit the racetrack. So, I mean, you still probably, lack a little bit of speed over the KBM trucks, and you got to find creative ways to get there. But I mean, hell, you won a race last year, so
and that's a great point. That is where I've seen it firsthand in the trucks. Keeping those rules the same means we run a trucks that are 11-year-old chassis, 12-year-old chassis that can still compete because the rules just haven't changed much. It's just small tweaks, small suspension changes, body changes that have happened, but all generally within the same design, same rule set. And so it's really static, and therefore it comes down to just executing within that rule set with people that know what they're doing. So definitely, it's definitely two philosophies.
The last note. the last note I'll say on this, and then we can move on, is I think as it pertains to the Cup Series and the next gen. So you come out with this new car, the next gen, and I think that last year was the part of the next gen age where you see a lot of variability in the car, right? And we saw that with a lot of winners, right? There's a lot of opportunity last year. People could hit on things. They hit on things maybe by accident, or they just found some speed. They didn't, because the car was new for everybody. And then I do think that you're going to see this rate of I'm trying to think of the right way to say it, but almost like a learning rate, or the speed at which the teams with the most resources and the best resources are going to learn these cars. And I think you're starting to see that variation level out, or that parity level out a little bit, even though the parity is still pretty good in the Cup Series. I think that parity is leveling out, where you're starting to see some trends of like, okay, these are the teams that have it figured out. Like the Hendrick cars are just been consistently good. Not every week, but they've been maybe more consistently good. But I do think that is going to hit a plateau in the next year or two, when ultimately all of the teams are going to just start to squeeze the most juice. They're going to find the most juice they can out of these things. And as long as NASCAR doesn't change too many extremely consequential rules on the next gen, then I do believe that the rate of development on the next gen car will balance out. That's what I was trying to say earlier, rate of development. This rate of development on this car is going to balance out to the point where, if you have a crew chief and an engineer that has been working on this car for an extended period of time, and you have all the sim tools, you're going to be 90% of the way there.
Yep.
Right. And you're going to have the majority of what it takes to get the car halfway decent. Because as long as there haven't been any rule changes over an extended period of time with this next gen, there just isn't going to be much more to develop with this car, especially because we're not manufacturing parts and pieces anymore, or we shouldn't be, right? Everything is spec.
Shouldn't be, keyword. I just want one more thing from Formula One. I want to give a shout out to Lando Norris. Last of the late breakers. Had some unbelievable braking moves down into the hairpin at turn 10 at Montreal, and then was hit with an unsportsmanlike penalty for slowing up too much on the safety car to maybe potentially gap off his teammate, because they double pitted, or double stacked as they used to call it back in the day. You pit two cars at the same time in Formula One, knowing they have one pit crew, basically because you have to at that point in the race. But if you can spread them out a little bit, you can basically keep your position, allow the two pit stops to happen with enough time gap between, so that the pit crew can get ready for the first and the second car. So he ended up losing his points position, was dropped down to 13th because of the penalty. But I loved his braking moves. I think it's something that we don't see often in Formula One anymore, because the brakes are so unbelievably good. Obviously the downforce alone, once you lift off the throttle in a Formula One car, it stops quicker than 90% of most race cars at full brake. Like, it's going to stop, and it's doing it very late. And so there's not a lot of time, and there's not a lot of difference between a great car and a bad car. But when you see a driver doing moves like that, I just thought it was super cool.
Well, so in what he was doing, though, was really cool and impressive is he's not stopping the car any different than he would have if he was by himself. What he's doing is, and the moves that Parker's talking about, there was a couple great onboards in the race that showed Lando making these dive bomb moves where he was seeming, extremely late on the brakes, and you wonder, like, how is he making the corner, right? It looks like he just tried harder than the other guy or had more capability, and you wonder as a driver, how does that even happen? But the real magic to it that drivers that are good at doing that is he's reshaping the corner, right? He's taking where his minimum speed point in a corner might be, let's just say it's right in the middle of the corner, and you have to lift for those F1 cars. It's probably at the 75-meter mark going into some of those hairpins. Let's say it's the hairpin in Montreal. He's probably lifting at the 100-meter or 75-meter mark into the hairpin, and let's just say his min speed, the slowest he's going to go through the corner is dead set in the middle of the corner, right? Well, in order for him to outbrake the car in front of him, he needs to, and he needs to gain that 15 feet on the car in front of him to get an advantage. He's basically needs to reshape the corner to where his minimum speed is 15 feet farther around the corner than it ideally would be. He's still braking. His decel rate and the way he slows the car down is actually still the same. And I'm saying this without looking at data. I'm saying this just off of driving experience, right? So I don't think that I'm wrong here, but I could be wrong. So Parker, you tell me one way or the other. He's not actually slowing the car down any different. He's not slowing the car down any different. He's not slowing the car down any faster. He's just moving. He's reshaping his whole corner so that he can advance 15 feet on the car that he's trying to pass at the beginning of the corner. And then he needs that leverage that he gains through the corner to basically force the other driver to concede the position. And then by then he's ahead of him on exit and they drive off the corner. Now the downside is, because he had to take something from the entry of the corner, he has to give up speed on exit. But hopefully he's gained a position, and I think he would still have DRS too for the next straightaway. So in F1. So at the end of the day, it's been, obviously if you go back and watch the onboards, he pulled it off quite well the couple of times that I saw him do it. But it's really difficult. It's very simple to explain. I hope that I explained it simply. It to me, it's very simple to explain and it's very simple to understand, but it's also, and when you really get it, it's actually pretty simple to do. It just takes, you have this, as a driver, you have this muscle memory of like where you're looking at the corner every time you go through that corner. And then for me, the challenge is, if I want to reshape the corner for one move and for one chance, I have to like know that I'm looking 15 feet farther around the corner than I have been for the last 10 laps or even the entire weekend, right? That could be the first time that you try to late brake someone into that corner. And so you have to know, hey, I'm going to dive bomb this guy and I can't stop the car. I can't lift 15 feet later, but still slow the car down to the same minimum speed point. Like when you see a driver, and you'll see this, at Chicago, you'll see this at all the next road courses in NASCAR. When you see a driver wheel hopping into the corner on a late break move, it's really just because they were trying to slow the car down to the same point that they were used to slowing the car down, but they lifted later. Right? So they're just asking too much of the car to slow down. What they needed to do is, hey, you can lift later, but you have to slow the car down to the same way that you've been slowing the car down. You're just moving your minimum speed point farther around the corner. And those F1 drivers, road racers, they're incredible at that. Absolute masters.
And eventually you go too far and then you don't make the corner. So it is a fine balance.
I mean, there's a limit to all of that. Yeah, there's a limit to all that. And I think, well, hang on a second, because I think that this is going to your original point where you're like, the brakes on these cars are so good and the braking zones are so tight. You don't get to see a lot of these moves as much as you do anymore. So I think the point there is, like, in a NASCAR Xfinity car, going into turn, 11 or 12 at Coda, down the backstretch, we're braking at the 650 yard or 650. What is it? How far is it? I think 650 feet. I'm trying to think how is it feet?
Yeah, it's not meter boards. Some do meter boards, some do feet. I think whenever NASCAR does it, it's feet.
So we're braking. We have a 600-foot braking zone, right? So there's a lot of space there to outbrake. If you're trying to pass a car that's 20 feet long in a 600-foot braking zone, it's not entirely difficult to brake 20 feet later than him and just move your min speed point 20 feet later around the corner and still make the corner out of a 600-foot braking zone. But if you're in an F1 car and you have a 100-foot braking zone and you're trying to gain 20 feet on the car in front of you, you're having to, move 20% of that corner around. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And just want to make sure you're following me.
I'm following you.
I didn't hear you.
No, I get you. So I
think that's what makes Lando's moves even more impressive is that like these guys have to, for them to make these moves with that tight of a braking zone, is like you have to be very precise. It's not that it's impossible, right? They can still move their corner around and reshape their corner, obviously, because they're really good at doing it. But you have to be so precise to do it. On top of the fact that they don't have fenders and they don't bounce off of each other like we do. That's probably they do tend to do it if you watch some of these races. But that's a huge factor too, is like we have a lot of forgiveness. You can, if you miss the corner a little bit, you can lean against the car next to you, where those guys can't do that. So they have to be way more precise because their braking zone is so much tighter, and also they can't hit each other.
I fully understand. I think for all those listeners out there that were like, what the hell is min speed point and all these things? It's like you said, it's just thinking about the parts to a corner. It's the braking zone, which means you're on the brake. There's the center point of the corner, which is your apex, as many would know. And basically somewhere in there is your min speed point. And then from that point on, you're accelerating. And that's the breakdown of a corner. And you're just trying to shift or move that. Let's move on from F1 because we do have other race series to jump into. IndyCar was at Road America. Alex Palou wins again this year. He's on a tear this year. I don't know if we have the numbers out there, but he's done some incredible numbers, like only in the top 10, multiple wins, just as having an amazing year. But I don't even want to talk so much about the race. I think we can do it another time. The part that I don't know if you saw this, Will Power had a very aggressive start to the weekend where he had an incident with Roman Grosjean where he basically felt that he was a piece of crap and needed to be punched in the face, where Roman basically moved over as he was trying to make a pass around him through Canada Corner. And then he actually did get in a major wreck with Scott Dixon, who was trying to get out of the way or didn't see him coming as he was on a hot lap and just cleaned Will Power out, who then Will went over there and obviously almost looked like he was going to fight him. He then also called the racetrack a shit track. Yeah, he double birded. He also called the track a shit track, to which the track president took that to heart and proceeded to return the favor by driving a sewage truck into the driver's lot and parked it in front of Will Power's bus. Will Power then moved it in front of Dixon's. I don't know, like, I didn't get to catch a lot of this, and I'll be honest.
Everybody thinks that NASCAR. Hold on. Everybody thinks that we're the hillbillies.
Yeah. What is this? My man Will just went wild. So I was on vacation this past weekend. It was my one-off weekend rest of the year, so was trying to sort of take it easy and tune out a little bit, but I was paying attention, and I kept seeing all this pop up, and I was like, what is going on? I thought it was like, at one point I was like, am I seeing is this all been happening over the last couple of days, or like what is going on with Will Power? It was all before the race.
So should I bring up the baseless point that I texted you about? Is that fair?
What is that?
Or is this just, am I just being dramatic? How is our boy Will at Penske? He's got to be. He's fine, right? I mean, he's a champion. Like,
yeah,
he's got to be fine,
what do you say?
right? Well, I just I seriously. This is so bad. This is so bad. I have no reason to say this, right? But like when I saw these headlines all in one day and this action, like this way that he's acting, I was like, is this guy like getting fired or something? Like, is he losing his ride? And this is his just like.
I shouldn't laugh about that. By the way,
maybe this would. What?
I shouldn't laugh about that, but I got what you're saying, because I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I'm not trying. I guess I'm not trying to laugh about it. But it's like, how many times do you see guys on their, when they like they're losing their ride or something, and they just go berserk, or they get, they all of a sudden have no filter and they don't care anymore, and they're just taking their anger out on everything that's around them. And I don't think that Will Power's losing his ride, nor does he deserve to. But I was like, what? What are these actions that I'm seeing all in one day?
It's just a bad day.
Take a deep breath.
Basically, just needed to go to sleep.
Day. Maybe that's it. Maybe everybody's entitled to a bad day.
Everyone's entitled to a bad day. You know what? You will say that loses the filter ever. I don't think Will Power ever had a filter. That guy, I got to spend a little bit of time with him at my time at Penske. He's a wild dude. He is very intense. He is very not interesting. People call him odd. He's odd for sure. But he's very driven and sort of just lives and breathes the idea of being fast in IndyCar, and he's very passionate about it. And so he has been outspoken, but I think it's a little bit of that's all he cares. That's the only thing, right? And there's just a singular focus to trying to go fast in the race car, and anything that impedes that is in his way. So that's why he's been there. That's why he's been as successful as he is. That's why he's so good at qualifying. But yeah, I just was watching it from afar, and I'm like, what is going on? This is the wildest thing. So our boy Will, we'll see if next weekend they have for their next race is going to be a little better, because he might need to just comment on Saturday, and who knows what could happen Sunday.
What do we got next?
NASCAR. We'll drive some of these headlines in the NASCAR world. Obviously, there was no racing this past weekend, but when this drops, so for those of you listening on Wednesday, June 21st, it'll most likely be this will drop a little bit ahead of their announcement, but that Josh Berry to Stewart Haas Racing is all but confirmed, which is an interesting move to see a guy that basically just a couple years ago hadn't even done a NASCAR National Series race really, and now is going to find himself in a Premier Cup ride. The question with that comes, where is the future for SHR? And obviously they've struggled a bit in the last couple of years in terms of having all their cars compete at the level I think they expect. Kevin Harvick has obviously been instrumental in a lot of their success in recent years. So it will be very interesting to see, sort of how they go through this process of rebuilding and putting things in place without him. But we'll wait for that announcement. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're wrong, Landon. Who knows?
I think one thing that would make if this turns out to be what gets announced, that'd be interesting for SHR is that would make them just about the only key partner organization that doesn't have a marquee driver, champion driver, maybe
franchise driver,
lineup?
maybe
franchise driver in their lineup. Not to say that,
yeah.
I mean, those drivers aren't capable, but obviously Hendrick has multiple franchise drivers in their lineup. Gibbs has multiple franchise drivers in their lineup. RCR has Kyle Busch. Roush has their anchor with Brad Keselowski. Even though, Chris Buescher's performance could exceed Brad's at times, that's not, that the point is saying that there's this sort of anchor veteran or anchor champion type driver that can lead the organization. With Stewart Haas, losing Kevin Harvick and replacing him with Josh Berry, I mean, that puts him at Josh Berry, Ryan Preece, Chase Briscoe, and I guess maybe an unknown there with the Almirola ride. So, I mean, is there a slot there for a franchise driver, or is that a good move for Stewart Haas? What do you think?
It's an interesting decision if this is what is announced. For me, I look at being in the Cup Series as in the future here, there's going to have, to be one of those franchise drivers, you've got to be top 1% of something, right? Whether that is being top 1% of, I don't know, but Kyle Larson would be top 1% of everything, right? But a guy who maybe is top 1% in certain scenarios or things or that sort of thing that puts you in a position to be like, yeah, road courses, you name the type of track, or maybe it's a way they approach a season or something they do. Maybe they're the best at developing a car, or they have a bunch of key partners that they bring with them that financially allows that car to run at a really good number, and therefore it helps the whole team be better, right? I don't know. All those things, basically, I think you can be top 1% at. To me, I look at one guy I would say is like, okay, this should be their star guy is Chase Briscoe, but he struggled this year, right? They've just announced a crew chief change. Richard Boswell will now be taking over the crew chief of the 14. So I think they do. It's an interesting thought process to maybe say, maybe we build and we say Chase isn't there yet, but he could be in the next couple of years. We get a Josh Berry who's going to take 2 or 3 years to maybe get there. And this is a long-term thought process that you don't see a lot of NASCAR teams do. So I don't know. It's an approach. I'm sure, having younger drivers and less experienced drivers equals a lot lower pay than having older and more experience and far more, more accolades. So it's just a different thought process or approach to putting together a cup team, as opposed to maybe what we see in the past, which was have your anchor guys, have your franchise guy, maybe built around 2 or 3 others that are able to help with the financial side in terms of the economies of scale and allow the team to have more resources and more engineers and that sort of thing. But you're really focused on those 1 or 2 real franchise anchor cars. I think that's what we see in the past, but maybe this is a different thought to that.
Yeah, I think, you won't be able to know, I guess, for sure until we see their full lineup.
Yep, that's true. Who's going to be
maybe the discussion point once we know it all.
We'll leave that one for later. Just quick other things from last week. It looks like Jimmy Johnson is planning to run again next year in a Toyota, which would be interesting. They did say that. No telling us what, or they didn't say. Sorry, I should be able to speak here eventually. They didn't say which races, but apparently he will be driving a Toyota. And our buddy Conor Daly will be running a truck race, the truck race in Mid-Ohio. So,
have you ever seen those like cursed paint schemes of like a Dale Earnhardt number 3 in a Toyota, or like a Kyle Busch GM Goodrich, but it's Toyota number 18? Like, have you ever seen those cursed paint schemes that just make you look at it and you cringe because it just takes your childhood memories of something and just twists it? Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you have any idea what you do? Is that going to be what it's like watching Jimmy Johnson drive a Toyota?
Well, he drove a Honda in IndyCar, so that did change it for me a little bit.
Yeah, but
the second I saw him leave Chevy one time.
This is NASCAR.
That is true. It will be weird. It will be weird seeing. It felt weird not seeing him in the 48. Not seeing him in Lowe's car was weird.
I know.
This is going to be really weird.
It already had like these Michael Jordan Washington Wizard vibes. Seeing him in a car other than the 48.
Oh, well, I like the idea that he keeps wanting to keep going. All right, stepping outside racing just a little bit, direct racing, Landon. We saw this headline, and you and I discussed it a little bit, because I think this is something that we're going to have to contend with and to understand and see where it goes, because of sort of where propulsion is headed in the future, and that is that Toyota will debut a manual shifting EV, electric vehicle, in 2026. So the idea that an electric car could have a manual transmission. Now, Formula E does do this already, and it's interesting to watch and see how they engage with it and listen to these things. But I personally think it's cool. Why not? Why not find a way to incorporate driving a little bit more, because you're You have to drive these things. At times, the driverless stuff is still very far away. It's still not at the level it needs to be, especially not on highways and regular roads. It's just not even close. So, as long as humans are still having to hold the wheel of these, if you want to give them a more fun way to do it, why not have a manual transmission in EV?
So I guess the only reason I thought it sounded silly is because do we need it for performance?
Well, no. Do you need 1,000 horsepower V8?
Maybe I don't know enough about EVs, but there's no, for an EV race car, like forget about whatever Toyota's talking about building here for a second. Does shifting gear, just creating some kind of gearbox with an EV actually serve a mechanical purpose, or is it there because they're trying to be able to shift a gearbox?
Yeah, I have no idea. Yep, no idea. So you know what? I'm not an engineer, nor especially an electric vehicle engineer. If you're a listener out there that knows these sorts of things or has any information on this, please let us know. Because Landon, are you going to be able to solve this for me as an engineer?
No, I have no idea.
All right, so
maybe that's silly.
Let us know.
How does an EV even power a drivetrain? How does an EV drivetrain work?
That
I bet Josh knows.
I did know for a while.
So they're okay.
I did.
So Josh is saying they're connected. Yeah. Somebody needs to tweet at us and tell us how an EV drivetrain works, or we need to figure it out.
Well,
ourselves,
I know how they work. The motors
hard.
are directly on the axle, or they're directly on the wheels, right? You can have 4-wheel or mid-axle, and there's all different design, right? It's just like an electric RC car. The transmission side to me is interesting because transmissions are there to be in the ultimate rev range, right? So you can match torque and horsepower and be in the perfect range of where that engine creates that, and on its torque curve and on its horsepower curve. For an electric motor, its torque is instant. That's why people make fun of the idea of shifting an electric car, because the torque is instantly there the second you hit the throttle. So what are you trying to achieve? That's the question. I don't know. If someone out there knows, they should let us know and reach out. What do you think?
I think they should, because I think it sounds silly if it doesn't actually serve a purpose. If we're just doing it out of the sake of nostalgia for driving manuals. The only argument I could say in support of it is like, okay, maybe if that's what whets the beak of a classical driver to get them in an EV, then fine. But to give someone the feel of driving a manual transmission, the car jerking and the speeds changing, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I need to learn more about what is the drivetrain of an EV.
I did just throw it at you.
Thank you for
that. Josh, our producer, is so excited about this. He can't see straight. He's setting all sorts of things. He really wants to see this. I also don't think he understands how it works. So we're going to ask for some experts out there to explain how it works. He's over here telling us he wants to see, it in cars that are designed for internal combustion engines to have EVs in them. But I don't think he realizes that if you put the EV in, then you don't really need the transmission that it initially had. So that would be an entirely different architecture. So we'll let him off on that one. But this section here, we want to just sort of give a shout out before we say what's coming up this next week, and that is basically we want questions from you, the listeners. So if you have questions, feel free to tweet at us, write comments on our Instagram post or TikTok post or on YouTube, and we'll try to collect all those, and we will sort of make this new section at times where we take some of your questions out there. The most interesting ones, of course, the best ones can get here on the pod, and we'll go through them. And just don't ask us about EV architecture.
Well, there is kind of we did get kind of a drivetrain question.
We did
this week. Wait, what? Yeah, because we do have a few questions, and we're asking. We definitely want you to post some more questions, so please tweet at us. But Brew U said, great show. I have a question. In the early 2000s, drivers had to be careful to not spin the motor backwards when spinning out. Is that no longer an issue?
So
the answer, do you know much about this and want to dive into it? Or
no,
you
you go. You go.
So yeah, it actually still is an issue. And what happens is it spins the motor the other direction. It stretches the rods. It usually will break a main cap from the sudden change of direction. And so the funny thing about the answer to that question is I will humbly admit that I had to ask somebody about that, because when I saw this on our show notes, I have not thought about spinning a motor backwards since I raced Legends cars when I was a teenager. And I created a habit from that point in my career to always push the clutch in or keep the rear wheels spinning when I spin out. And I'll say that I've just never even thought about it. As many times as I spun out in a NASCAR, which I have, I can't say that I've never spun the motor backwards, and I can't say that I've never damaged a motor from spinning the motor backwards, but I just can't tell you a story that it like actually was brought up to me. So I don't know about you, Parker, but so again, two things. Number one, it's been a habit. It's like literally muscle memory for me now. Like if I'm spinning sideways to drive the car in a certain way, that I trained since I was a teenager to not spin the motor backwards. So that could be one role that it's played in my non-mental existence of thinking about this. And then number two, there's just call it the disconnect between drivers and engine shops. And, there's probably been 20 motors that I've destroyed over my career that I just never was told about. They had to rebuild the whole thing. And it was maybe, laps away from blowing up because I spun it out early in the race and spun it backwards. But I did, yes, humbly admit that I had to ask a question to an industry friend and be like, hey, is this something we still care about?
Well, so I think there's a couple things to dissect here. One, yes, the way you put it in terms of the muscle memory. So for us, it's nailing the throttle or knocking it into neutral or putting the clutch in when that point where you've lost the car and you realize I'm not going to be able to stop this thing from spinning fully around. The other thing that's interesting is in the next gen car, you obviously have a sequential transmission. So just knocking it into neutral is not really possible. So you'll see them maybe downshift as they start to spin and try to keep the rear tire spinning. Or the other option is you have to put the clutch in. So because you can't just knock it all the way to neutral in a really quick fashion unless you were down, in that first gear or second gear. So I think that's where the question maybe stems from. And it definitely, for the motors, though, it hasn't changed. You don't want to spin them backwards as you put all the reasons it hurts it. But I think that's why the question came up, because of sequential shifting.
Sweet.
Yeah. So that's one question. Thanks, Brew U. Appreciate that. Send us more, and we'll put them on the pod. We look forward to that. So this weekend, NASCAR's back. Nashville. I'll be racing the Xfinity Series, an important race for us with Big Machine Vodka's home race, the Big Machine record label. So that's be interesting and fun to have all that sort of fanfare around us in Nashville. I love this city. I think it's so much fun. I will also be back on TV with NASCAR and NBC this weekend, except I won't on Sunday be in Nashville, but you'll have to tune in to see where I am. But yeah, this place is an interesting racetrack because when they put that resin down, it lays rubber and it changes massively over single runs, over weekend, dependent on heat. So it can be a real interesting race at times just because how much the track changes.
Yeah, be interesting. Be ready to be looser than crap when you unload and tighter than hell when the race is over.
Yep, that's the transition. Perfect. Well, I think that's a great place to end. That's the pod. Thanks for listening.
To you.
Hey, before you go, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, click the bell icon below to be alerted to our latest videos. We also request that you let us know every single thing that we did wrong in this video or prior ones in the comment section below. We might just go through and answer them, or you'll make it to the next episode of the podcast or our next video. Also, subscribe on your favorite listening platform to be able to listen to this podcast on the go. And subscribe to our newsletter at themoneylap.com to get the best 5 minutes in motorsports delivered directly to your email inbox every Tuesday and Thursday. Thanks for watching. Yes, we are both wearing a white hat backwards. How did this happen?
I didn't want to wear it front ways
What's on the front?
because it's my Ritz hat. I could though.
It's because we both had ritzy vacations this weekend.